Good afternoon. We are here, Jeneen from Jeneen C.A.R.E.S. I am here with yet another board member from Frederick County Public Schools. I am thrilled and excited and amazed by their leadership during this time and always. So Jeneen from Jeneen C.A.R.E.S. is caring, achieving, restoring, empowering, and supporting our youth and building legacy leaders for the future. I think we heard the theme this year from Dr. Marco about legacy leadership, and he has always done an amazing job just building the capacity of others with his elite program and other things that he's leading in our county under the leadership of our phenomenal superintendent, Dr. Albin. And so I'm glad to be here with some of the board members to just kind of get to know them personally. I think what we think about restorative practices in our district, we've had a work group since 2017, which was led initially by Jet Reed, who was a former principal at TJ High School. And so we've had principals and teachers and community members doing research on what restorative practices is and how it could really shape some of the areas of growth for our school district. And so I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Jarman today, who is going to kind of just tell her story a little bit, what she is doing, where she has been, and some of her passions and core values from her story. I think it's important for us to highlight our stories because they can motivate and inspire others to believe in themselves and to know that they can do anything they want if they work really hard. And so thank you, Dr. Jarman, for being here today. Please just give us a little bit of background and experiences. Tell us about yourself and who you are and what you're passionate about.
Sure. So I'm going to start from my empowerment group. And my empowerment group was, I went to a women's college. I went to Goucher College, and I started in the late 70s and graduated in 1982 from Goucher. And much of my experience was about empowering women. And the only leaders on our campus were women. And I met a wide variety of women from various backgrounds and cultures. I studied languages, so I met people from a variety of cultures and backgrounds. And for me as a woman, that was empowering. And then right after college, I got married and had a young daughter. And I remember being at various events surrounded by educated people and having the conversation toned down just a bit for me because I was a stay-at-home mom. And I was a stay-at-home mom out of choice. I was fortunate enough to be able to choose to stay at home and raise my daughter and then my son. And so I was a parent volunteer and I'm very engaged in my children's education and in raising my children. That was the primary focus of my life. And I was fortunate enough to be married to someone who had an income level where I was able to do that. And so I recognize that privilege, that not everyone is able to do that. And so I saw my role as president of the parent-teacher organization more as an advocate for other children whose parents could not be there. I was at school with my children volunteering. I was at home making sure homework was done, that they were engaged in learning activities, but I knew that not every child had that opportunity. And so my work on the PTO was largely to enable those opportunities for other students and to help other parents who had to be at work or had other callings that they just couldn't be there to advocate for their children as students. And then when my son, when he was in the 6th grade going into middle school, said, "You cannot volunteer at the school anymore. It is not cool. I don't want my mom in the classroom as a parent volunteer." So I said, well, how about if I substitute teach, and then with the money I earn, I'll buy you an Oriole season mini plan. And he was okay with that. And so I started substitute teaching. I will say that my son will be 34 years old in just a few weeks. And we still have that Oriole mini plan.
Wow.
And so baseball has just become, well, sports has become our connecting because he's a sports fan. And so with substitute teaching, my background was in languages. I got a call for a long-term position and teaching Spanish at Middletown High School. we had a family gathering. We talked about how that was going to change the schedule, change our lives, but everybody agreed, go for it, Mom, do it. And I fell in love with being in the classroom. I fell in love with working with students. I fell in love with the challenge of trying to meet the learning needs of all my students. I remember lying in bed at night awake thinking, okay, I know that Richie didn't get this, so what can I do? What can I change to help him? Is there somebody in the class who gets it, that he connects with? And so teaching my students became my passion, my mission. And one of my colleagues at TJ Middle said, you know, why don't you get a master's degree? FCPS will help with your tuition. And I thought, I'm 40 years old. How can I go back to the classroom? And I did. And I got my master's from Hood College when I was 46 years old. And I earned my doctorate in second language acquisition when I turned 51, the same year that I earned another really important title, and that was grandmother.
Oh.
Education has been my passion, first for me, and then for my children, and then for my students. And I retired from FCPS in 2016. I started a full-time position at Shepherd University. I'm now the Director of International Affairs at Shepherd University. I work with students from all over the globe, helping them to adjust to American culture, which I always tell them is the weird one. Culture seems to be much more normal, I think, in terms of what our culture is. I was blessed to have been appointed to the Board of Education by County Executive Jan Gardner in January of 2019, where I can continue to advocate for all students. And one of the challenges that I think with being on the board is that we have to look at the wide spectrum of all students. And while parents certainly advocate for their students, and I understand their advocacy, the board has to look at what is best for all. And we are really taking a very serious approach to looking at things through an equity lens to make sure that we can provide the best education for all of our students. And our students come into the classroom with an extremely wide variety of needs, and we need to do our best to meet those needs.
Wow, what an introduction. I have been most impressed by just listening to all of the board members and your stories and your energy and your passion and your lifelong love of learning and education and your, you know, it's just amazing. And I'm just so proud to be a parent in Frederick County, and I'm proud to be an administrator in Frederick County. And I'm proud to have leaders like you and the other members of the board to be advocates for all and for our
everybody, because education is the life-changing experience.
It is.
And that opportunity has to be available for everyone. Our founding fathers said it, public education is the forum for learning for all. And we as board members need to make sure that that is the legacy of our founding fathers, of our boards of education, of those in education.
Well, I will just say, well said, and I don't have any follow-up questions for you on that. And I appreciate hearing about your lifelong learning of education. I'm the same way. I started with Suzuki violin at the age of 3, and you know, I'm working on my doctorate right now at George Washington.
Go girl, you go girl.
I'm all but dissertation right now, and I'm looking for the perfect study, and I'm doing it on restorative practices. So I'm hoping.
Excellent. Yeah. I would love to hear the results of your study.
Yes. Okay. So now let's get into the restorative practices side of our interview. It's about reflection. When I think restorative practices, I think relationships and reflection, all of which you know are very important in our field of education. If you can't build a relationship, if they don't know how much you care, then they don't care how much you know, right? So with that in mind, we've been on quarantine since March 13th. What has been most present on your mind since then?
So, and this came from within. I must recommend a wonderful book by David Brooks called The Social Animal. And in it, he examines that the idea that human beings are different because of our need, our physical and emotional need for interaction with each other. And so we had talked before this interview about the virtual experience and the virtual experience enabling us to interact, but it's not the same as that face-to-face interaction. And in his book, David Brooks talks a lot about just the touch. I remember when students were assessing, and I remember walking around, and just when you put your hand on someone's shoulder in a gentle, affirming way, you can feel the physical reaction and the relief that comes from just that small touch. And so Brooks's idea that physically and mentally we need human touch. And my concern is that that has been absent. I live by myself, and I went through cancer and a divorce, and I have been in therapy for several years. And when I was talking to my therapist about how I was feeling stressed, I said, I really don't have any stressors. I'm not stressed about my job. I'm not stressed about many things that other people are stressed about, and yet I'm having the same physical responses to stress. And she said, Lois, you're by yourself. You've been by yourself for weeks. Your body is stressed because you don't have that physical interaction with other people. And I started to process that as I'm an adult. I can rationalize that. But what does that mean to our students? Ooh. And so we talk about restorative practices, but another big topic that we have to talk about hand in hand with that is social and emotional learning. And what is this doing? What is this quarantine setting doing emotionally to our students? And it's one of the things that has been a huge concern for me.
Wow. Again, another amazing response. So well researched, so well just spoken. I think so vulnerable. And that's what restorative practices really is. It encourages people to really seek within, to reflect on their experiences, to understand how their experiences impact how they show up in life and how they're present or not present, and the trauma-informed lens of understanding the impact of trauma and how it can impact others, including yourself first, but then others, right? So, wow, thank you for sharing
exactly.
therapy. Thank you for sharing about, kind of some of the obstacles that you have worked through in life. Thank you for...
Well, and I know from my generation, and I think it was Tipper Gore who really brought mental health to the forefront. Mm-hmm. And I think that our mental health is every bit as important as our physical health, and yet we neglect it. And when we talk about restorative practices in terms of behavior in our classrooms, we largely focus on the action that needs to be corrected, but we don't focus on the emotional experience that brought the child to that action.
Absolutely, the trauma.
Where we need to go. That's where we need to go. And so, when we talk about these parameters that are set up to correct behavior, mm-hmm. have to look at the root of that behavior before we can even begin to hope to correct the behavior.
Yes, absolutely. The trauma-informed lens. And so with restorative practices, the research that I'm doing and the work that I'm doing and the trainings that I'm facilitating all speak to, things like the impact of shame and holding students accountable, but allowing them to really change their behavior, not just to be punished. And so moving from that punitive lens to the restorative, where we're actually, making growth and changing behaviors and really responding to the direct needs and not just, ostracizing. And we're thinking about that reintegrative shaming where we, understand and separate the deed from the doer. And we say to ourselves, yes, your action was inappropriate and it did not meet our expectations, but we still care about you. And we want you to uncover what triggers, what trauma caused you to respond in such a way, and how can you use things to know about yourself and how you can respond appropriately the next time. And we're not going to give up on you. We believe in you. And I think when I was interviewing Mr. Young, he was saying the same things, because he's doing a lot of work with, second chances and making sure that everybody, all people, have an opportunity. And so I really love this energy, and I love that our county is doing social emotional learning instruction through PFLAG curriculum from K through 2. It's amazing. And then some of the schools are using their own personal funds to make sure that the elementary level, the entire K through 5, are having that opportunity. And I have always been a firm advocate. And I think school culture and climate has been a priority in every building that I've been in. I've been in probably 7 schools since in my 20 years in education. And I've seen the impact of charismatic leaders and restorative leaders versus punitive style leaders, or those who are neglectful, or those who are permissive in their style. That's the social discipline window with respect to restorative practices. And we need to be high control, but we need to also support. And what does each person need to be supported to reach and to meet our high expectations? And so that's what restorative practices is all about. And so with that being said, what's been the hardest thing for you during this time?
Being alone. Not being with people. I have my dog to hug. But it's just not being with people. And I did, over Memorial Day, I did a social distancing picnic with some friends. And it felt normal. We all had our masks on when we weren't eating, and we were sitting 6 feet away, but just being in the same space with other people. And if you don't mind, I'm going to just go back to what we were just talking about, because I read, I've been reading a lot too about the restorative practices, the social and emotional learning. And there was a quote in an article that I recently read that has stayed in my mind as we talk to teachers. And I use it a lot when I teach education classes at Shepherd as well. And so as I'm talking to teachers, and that quote was, relationships before everything.
Oh, yes.
Context before content. And Maslow for, oh gosh, what's the hierarchy of learning? Maslow before
Bloom's.
There you go. Bloom's taxonomy. Oh my gosh, Maslow before Bloom's. That we have our hierarchy of needs, and unless those social and emotional needs are met, we're not going to get to Bloom's.
Absolutely.
Our teachers have relationships with students. You're not going to get to content because the brain is blocked. In my research, I did a lot about, it was largely about language acquisition in the brain, but in that, learning a lot about the brain. When we have trauma, when we have negative experiences, the brain fills with cortisol, and cortisol blocks learning.
Yep, that's absolutely right. You're on it.
And so we have got to shift our teaching model to meet the brain. And if we have a social and emotional brain, then that's how we got to teach.
Absolutely. And that's always been my leadership style, that caring, that, recognizing of the trauma and the kind of the awareness of who your students are, what they're dealing with, and how you need to reach them, and doing whatever it takes to reach every single student. And so I applaud all of our teachers who are restorative in nature and who are going above and beyond to really dig deep to get to know their students, and to push past those barriers of socioeconomics or anything else that they may bring their way that, is not defining their potential at all. Say. And
some of the students some of the students who come to their classroom, when I learn about what they are going home to, I wonder how I would survive.
Exactly.
And so sometimes a hug and just a pat on the back, and if you need to take today off from the lesson, just, engage in some quiet reading, or, let's find something quiet for you to do where you can put your mind at rest. Because, Jeneen, if I try and teach that brain, it's not going to learn anything anyway. And so let's let that brain take a break. It needs a break. And so for so many of our students, schools are safe places. And so let's let them have the safety that they need.
Absolutely. I had a teacher from one of my old districts post something on one of her social media sites that was a message to parents from a teacher. And then she's basically, to summarize what she said, it was the message of, we can catch your students up. They're not far behind. They're not ahead. No one's anywhere but where they should be. Home with you. Please nurture them, because we can't fix the social emotional drama or damage, I would say, that they're experiencing. So care.
And then my concern becomes, what about those students who don't have the parents? What about those students who don't have a home? What about those students who are homeless? What about those students who are living in the mountains with no internet service?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
our fortunate students are the ones who are with parents, who have a caring adult in the home that can meet those needs, but that's not all of our students.
It's not, and these are the messages that we're having. These are the conversations that we're having in our student services leadership team. These are the heartaches that we are sharing. These are the concerns that, principals and administrators and PPWs and social workers and therapists who are skilled, trained leaders, we're still just so concerned about all of that. And so thank you for sharing that. So what are you doing to remain positive? What are you doing with yourself to remain positive?
I do yoga.
Okay, I like that.
Exercise. I try and engage virtually with people every day. I count my blessings.
Yes.
And try and help others where I can. We are human beings. We are social creatures. I need that. And just recognizing that I need that is a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. I think that the self-care lessons from the International Institute of Restorative Practices, because one of the things that I've been doing is a lot of professional learning, and they talked about, I think it was Dr. Frida, I can't remember her last name, but she talked about the importance of touch, even if you're by yourself, and how important that was. And so that self-care.
A little bit of shoulder rub on.
Yes. And the mindfulness. So the yoga is great too. And I'm glad to see that some of our schools are also implementing that. Yes. I know that one time during one of my student services leadership team, I nominated Anne McGreevy to stand up and do some mindfulness with the team. They were looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm restorative, and you're about to be restorative too. So finding
I reckon I'm on the Maryland Association for Boards of Education. I'm on the planning committee for the conference. And I said, why don't we have a yoga session? If we want our students to be able to do that, if this is part of restorative practices, then we need to understand how it feels. And yoga feels fantastic. Meditation, after a while, just makes you realize what to focus on. And if we can have our students acquire those skills early on in life. My granddaughter was showing me yesterday during our play date, her downward dog.
Yes.
So I think that, we all come to an understanding of what those little changes in our lives can do for us, physically, emotionally, all of that.
Absolutely. And final, this has been so engaging, so enlightening, so motivating, so inspirational to know that, we have on our board someone as passionate for equity, as passionate for mental health, as passionate for social emotional learning. As a parent, that warms my heart to know that you're working, with other stakeholders, for all stakeholders. It's just, amazing to hear and see, and to be able to meet with you during this time. And so finally, what other messages, because you've already given so many great messages, what other messages might you end on speaking to the parents and speaking to the students right now?
Okay, here's one. I've told my daughter this. I tell young parents this. When you are speaking to someone, and I know it's difficult virtually, but when you are at home, put everything down and look that child in the eye, because that means I have 100% of your attention.
Be present.
I matter.
Yes.
And so we can listen, but unless we turn, when I'm talking to Chloe, my granddaughter, and she has something important to tell me, and when I'm with her, it's holding hands and looking her in the eye and saying, tell me. There's nothing in this world right now more important than what you have to tell me. So tell me. And I think that in our technology world, we think that we can multitask. And I'm going to go back to the brain. The brain cannot multitask. The brain will give more attention to one thing than the other. So when you put things down and you look in the eye and you touch, that's 100% of your attention is there. And that's where it needs to be.
Great message. Great message.
There's that wonderful video I show my students all the time, the look up. Look up. There's so much you miss when you don't look up and you don't look. You know, you can read somebody's eyes, you know, and that's a skill that our students are losing when we put them in front of technology too much. Is how do I read body language? Eye contact is so incredibly important.
Yes, it is a social, emotional, and that emotional intelligence. Oh my goodness. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time.
This has been wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. And you know, I always like being invited. I've been on a couple of different work groups and committees. And so I always appreciate getting to know different people across the district. And so thank you for your opportunities.
We do have some amazing people in our district.
Yes, we do.
I just want to give a shout out to all of the teachers. We have some amazing teachers in our system. Human beings who are so dedicated to our students, and we're so fortunate to have that.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Dr. Jarman, for your time and for your legacy leadership in our county. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best and continued leadership in our county.
Take care. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.